It is August 19th of the year 1881, and a group of black American cavalrymen are on patrol outside of Fort Cummings in New Mexico. The Apache followers of Victorio and Nana had been carrying on an armed resistance since 1879, but by this point Victorio was dead. These Buffalo soldiers were fighting for the American army. All of a sudden, the forces of Nana attacked the American force, killing the lieutenant and 3 soldiers outright. The Buffalo soldiers regrouped under Sergeant Brent Woods and charged the Apaches, causing them to retreat. Sergeant Woods received a Medal of Honor following the engagement. During the Civil War, the United States formed several regiments known as the United States Colored Troops, which was made up largely of black and Native American soldiers. While the USCT was disbanded in 1865, in 1867, 2 new cavalry regiments, the 9th and 10th, and 4 infantry regiments, mostly drawn from USCT veterans, were made. However, the infantry was reduced to 2 regiments, the 24th and 25th. By 1870, black soldiers made up 10% of the U.S. fighting force. One of the first major engagements the Buffalo soldiers fought in was the Colfax County War, which started in 1873 and ran to 1888 in Colfax County, New Mexico. The soldiers took part in shootouts throughout the county. The 4 Buffalo soldier regiments all had forces in New Mexico fighting the Apache forces of Victorio and Nana in the late 1870s. While Victorio put up a legendary fight, he died in October of 1880 at the Battle of Tres Castillos, which was more of a massacre as Mexican forces surrounded Victorio's camp, which was running low on ammunition. Several forces of Buffalo soldiers continued fighting Nana's force, with the last major engagement of the war being fought at Gavilan Canyon in 1881, the battle I described at the start of this video. Buffalo soldiers were also used through the 1880s and 90s to remove Sooners, or illegal settlers, from native lands, along with squatters. The 9th Cavalry found itself on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota during the events of the Ghost Dance War from 1890 to 91, and were on the reservation when the 7th Cavalry committed the Wounded Knee Massacre, murdering 300 innocent Lakota men, women, and children. Another engagement the 9th Cavalry found itself in was the Johnson County War from 1889 to 93 in Wyoming. The 6th Cavalry had initially been sent to Johnson County to stop the violence, but they failed and were replaced. The Buffalo soldiers arrived in Shugs in June of 1892. The Buffalo soldiers were met with hostility from the locals on account of race. This culminated in a brief gunfight over a dispute about a prostitute, and following the locals shot upon the soldiers on sight. This led to a brief skirmish where 20 Buffalo soldiers rode to town to find the perpetrators only to be fired on. This attack surprised the soldiers, and 1 died with 2 wounded. The soldiers retreated, then sent 2 detachments to pacify the town. These soldiers were allowed in and conducted an investigation. However, those who killed the Buffalo soldier were not found. The violence caused the 9th to be reassigned from the region in November of 1892. Buffalo soldiers were often met with prejudice from civilians and white soldiers. During race riots, Buffalo soldiers sent to stop the riots were often attacked, like in Rio Grande City, Texas in 1899. With the outbreak of the Spanish-American War, Buffalo soldiers were sent to the Caribbean and the Philippines. However, violent confrontations with white civilians occurred while they were deploying through Florida cities like Tampa and Lakeland. In 1907, Buffalo soldiers from the 9th and 10th Cavalry were brought to West Point to teach horse riding instruction and mounted drills and tactics, as black cavalry were considered the best at riding horses. This continued until 1947. In 1917, parts of the 24th Infantry were stationed in the heavily segregated Houston, Texas. The soldiers were made to sleep in segregated bunks and even had to use a separate water source. They also experienced constant bad treatment by the white population of a race. The soldiers started clashing with the all-white Houston PD, and when a woman was dragged out of her home and arrested in the black community of San Felipe, tensions reached a boiling point. A Buffalo soldier, Private Alonzo Edwards, offered to assist in the arrest, only to be pistol whipped. Another Buffalo soldier, Corporal Charles Baltimore approached the Houston PD to ask about Edwards, only to be pistol whipped himself, then shot at as he ran. The police chased Baltimore to find him hiding under a bed, dragging him out to beat and arrest him. What happened to Baltimore reached the Buffalo soldiers at camp, with rumors he was shot and killed. The soldiers began plotting to retaliate, but were calmed when an injured Baltimore arrived at camp. Rumors of a white mob caused guard at the camp to be increased, and soldiers started panicking and trying to arm themselves. One of the soldiers fired his rifle and stated the white mob was approaching to kill them, and a riot began. Soldiers began firing indiscriminately and decided to march on Houston. They marched 2.5 miles, firing at houses and cars, until finally being met by police in the San Felipe neighborhood. The police did not think the soldiers were armed, but were proven wrong when a gunfight broke out. By the end of the violence, 17 were dead, 4 police officers, 9 civilians, and 2 soldiers. Houston went under martial law, and 13 were hanged for the mutiny, including Baltimore, who likely did not participate in the violence. Buffalo soldiers continued to fight in the military despite the attacks over race. They served in both World War I and in World War II. In 1948, President Harry Truman passed Executive Order 9981, which desegregated the military. In the Korean War, black and white soldiers fought together for the first time in integrated units. The 24th Infantry saw conflict during the Korean War and was the last segregated unit to do so, being disbanded in 1951. Today, monuments and museums dedicated to the Buffalo soldiers can be found across the nation. Buffalo soldiers were used like shock troops throughout the American Indian Wars, with the lives of black soldiers being seen as less important. While Buffalo soldiers have an almost legendary status today, their stories are all very real and deserve to be told. So the Bob Marley song was very real. Thanks for watching.